Conversations with Grandfather, Volume 7, Grandfather's Sixth Prophecy, Preparation and Exodus. Even though I read this, probably read this last week, and I cannot remember, but it's a great lead-in because, as you know, Grandfather and I were at odds a bit, and I was I was really pissed off that Grandfather was telling me, eventually, grandson, you're going to have to leave your cherished wilderness, these temples, and bring back the teachings of the earth to everyone, anyone who will listen. And that just didn't sit right with me. I had heard the 4 prophecies and everything else, and they scared the living hell out of me, as improbable as they sounded, from holes in the sky to, excuse me, to the stars that will bleed the fires of Armageddon, almost a biblical prophecy when you get to that. And I just could not conceive of it. I couldn't believe it. But part of me, knowing Grandfather and his damn track record and the power of constantly being right, there was never an if with Grandfather's prophecies. There was always, it was dead on. It was dead on. The only ifs I have ever encountered would be he'd say, X, Y, and Z would happen if in this year B happens, and if B happens, X will happen. If C happens, Y will happen. That's the if. But you see, it always comes back to choice. And as I talked in the last recording about these 3 supporting prophecies, I was in a dilemma about these for 2 reasons. Number one, they came much later than that night on Prophecy Hill. They were alluded to, and I should have caught it, when he said, I sat as if a stone, and my heart was heavy as stone with the burden that I carried. I should have known he was talking about the stone people, that whole philosophy of stone. And when you look at stone, that ancientness to it, that the oldest beings on earth, it becomes the threshold, the doorway to silence. And you go within to find that silence before you can expand outward. That is truly going the route of the stone, going inward, as I began to teach the experimental philosophy class to do and the soul of the shaman class to do. By going inward, you find you are going outward at the same time. And that's what brought Grandfather to say, you reach a point where there is no inner or outer dimension, no separation of self, just that which is called oneness. And when you look at that inner or outer dimension, you technically cease to exist, yet at the same time, you become all things. It's such an epic expansion of self, of mind, body, emotion, spirit, that it is incomprehensible. It can be touched, but never fully understood in the context of words, which is the main failing. So back to this supporting prophecy. I rather look at these as the backbone. And this stone prophecy, followed by the preparation or the Exodus prophecy, followed by the warning prophecies. I realized why Grandfather held them back, that shrewd coyote bastard. When I look back in my notes and I look at that date, that time when I was 12 years old on Prophecy Hill, and when he delivered the 5th, 6th, and 7th prophecy, I'm looking at these 4 prophecies and these 4 prophecies coming true, and damn it, looking at the time frame of that evening, adding the time to it in that condensed time frame brings us to our now, right now, in my life, in your life, in the life of the world. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's why he held him back. Yeah, it was only a period of a handful of weeks. But if you look how fast those prophecies came, in other words, when I bore witness to that first prophecy, that starvation, long after grandfather left, and the distance of time from that to the holes in the sky, how many hours had transpired? How many fingers of the moon did I watch pass? How far did those stars rotate? I look at that span of time, and then I look at the weeks that passed into the next season, and I can come back and say, okay, the starvation and the red sky were X amount of years. Grandfather hit that exactly now. At the threshold. The threshold I speak about where we all now stand. We've got to do something, anything, or we're going to make the wrong decision globally. That's why grandfather knew at that stone prophecy that he would not see these events up until that 5th supporting prophecy on those 4 days of silence as he sat like a stone. Before that, the Spirit told him, these things you may never see. But in that event of time, and this is how crazy prophecy can get, this is how crazy the probable and possible futures can get, is that in the time that first prophecy was delivered to grandfather, to that what I call here the 5th prophecy, it had changed. It had moved to you may never see to he knew he wouldn't see. But let's rename the prophecies. Let's replace them in this order. Prophecy 1, certainly the starvation, the emerging of the bizarre diseases that leave modern science and medicine baffled and spellbound at how fast they can mutate. The second, the holes in the sky. Put that stone prophecy, and let's call the starvation the first, the stone prophecy the second. Let's call then the holes in the sky the third. Then we call this one the fourth. The preparation / exodus. Look at it like getting ready to run, standing on the threshold. Then comes the bleeding stars. Then comes the warning. Then comes Armageddon, as far as I'm concerned. And then finally, the 8th, the epilogue, the grand warning and grand decision, the prophecy of hope. And again, should I call it prophecy or warning? They're both. These are warnings. Warnings that if we do not make the right choices, that these things will happen. And if they happen, globe, humankind, you screwed up. You didn't make the right choices. So up until that starvation, we certainly didn't make the right choice. Up until those holes in the sky, we didn't make the right choice. Now we face the red skies. Have we made the right choice? No. I'm inclined to say, as an optimist, not yet. But it's a small, feeble, not yet. Anyway, am I making sense, or am I way off in left field? It's very, very, you're shaking your head, yes. When you look at the sixth prophecy, and I keep these together mainly because they occurred during that time of silence, which is a call it a false positioning in the whole scheme of the prophecies. You know, and knowing that Grandfather purposely delivered those four prophecies with such hellfire and brimstone, it scared the hell out of us. And then the other ones came just equally as scary. And remember, Rick was no longer part of the picture, no longer part of the equation. But we are at that preparation right now in so many ways. And it is a preparation. And when I say preparation, which leads to the Exodus, and you remember, when those skies turn red, get out of Dodge. You're in Exodus. So this one is from right now, preparation. And as soon as we get close to those red skies, there comes the Exodus. In fact, to highly spiritual people, they will know at least a full moon before the red skies, and they will begin the Exodus according to Grandfather. Now, forgive me if I've already read this. This is Grandfather talking when I had asked him why I had to go back and teach. As I told you, I had a dream. I still have a dream. I want to get back in the bush so deep, so far, that I don't have to see another human being, except for a select few, unless I want to. And that would take a long journey to see one. Wouldn't that be nice? You'd never get sick again. Unless you did something stupid like eat a rancid carcass of an animal or something. You know, you would not catch humanistic airborne diseases. And Grandfather said, the choice to go back to the world of man is not yours or mine. It is a world of spirit that sends us. Now, when he said of spirit, he meant God. It's God who sends us. It is the Creator that gives us vision. Each to his own capacity, each in his own way. I am living my vision and teaching the way that vision dictates. And someday you must do the same. And that pissed me off. Because I'm figuring, I'm going to wait till I'm like 83. Find two little kids and teach them just like Grandfather. Well, that was not what my vision said. Reach as many people as humanly possible. Period. And I asked Grandfather, but how will I know what to teach, where to go, and who to reach with the teaching I asked? Grandfather said, "The way and the means will be made manifest through vision and from the direction of the world of spirit. So make no concern about these things, for to a person living beyond his own spiritual selfishness, the way will become clear." Thus, if a person is attuned to the world of spirit, the world of vision, and working for things beyond his or herself, then the path and time to act become clear. Until then, allow the spirit of the earth and the Creator to teach, and the vision quest to guide, and all else will become reality. That is a very important statement. You know, and how many times have you heard me say, I do not believe in coincidence? I look back at the day I stepped out of wilderness, and through the whole history of the Tracker School, and trying desperately to get this vision out, to preserve these skills, these old ways, these philosophies that were so sacred to Grandfather. And when I look at the darkest hours, I would have it no other way. No other way. Because it's from that pain, that torment, that riding the edge of wanting to surrender and give up, that something bigger takes over. Something else opens up and brings you to a higher level. You find energy where you didn't think there was any. I hear people say, God, if only I knew then what I knew now, I would change nothing. No, I'm not saying there's no such a thing as bad medicine or bad choices. It's just what we do with that bad medicine and bad choices. What we do with those stinking wake-up calls. The stinking, endless feeling sorry for oneself because you don't think you're making a whole hell of a lot of difference. That all just makes you stronger, makes you damn more determined. And that's what the preparation is all about. Eventually we packed and broke camp. And this is an afterthought. I had understood the things that Grandfather had taught me that night so long ago, but I would not accept the fact that someday I had to bring the wilderness philosophy back to society. I could understand that man could not seek just spiritual enlightenment for self, for to do so would be running away from oneself, from the greater self that includes all of mankind. For many years, I did not feel the urgency of what Grandfather taught, nor could I love my fellow man enough to give up my wilderness and return to society. It's funny, there's an old saying, I love people, I hate society. You know? There was so much that I had yet to learn, and it would be years before I would fully understand the four prophecies. Hell, I still don't understand them, to tell you the truth. There's still little things that gnaw at me. What I essentially did those many years ago was to put out of my mind all that had happened on Prophecy Hill and concentrate my efforts on spending as much time as possible in the wilderness. Yeah, I tried to put it out of my mind. Still they haunt me. Still they taught me. And I could never be free of them, no matter how much I denied them. They were there. They're always there. They're haunting. They're driving. I watch the clock ticking. I get out of bed in the morning and wonder what the skies are going to look like. What is going to happen to my children, my grandchildren, your grandchildren? Is someday society going to wake up and make the right choice? We don't have many some days left. You know, it's ironic. My soon-to-be stepdaughter was looking at a music video on television, and I forget what group was playing. I never heard of the group or what they were playing, and they were actually recording this session on a glacier. And they said 2 years after this was recorded, and that was whatever date it was, the glacier the size of Manhattan or bigger had melted in 2 years. Was it Manhattan? I don't remember. It was bigger than Manhattan. But I wonder how many people really grasped that. It's like the glaciers are way up there. The starvation is over there. The genocide is over there. The diseases are an ocean away. Actually, that ocean is a 6-hour flight. So what I said was I tried to pass those prophecies out of my mind and tried to learn as much as possible in the wilderness. That's the state we're all in right now. I'm trying to learn daily as you are. We're searching on a physical, mental, emotion, spiritual level. In the back of our minds, you cannot be alive and not know that there is something wrong. I don't care how cloistered and imprisoned that poor bastard is in the bowels of New York City or LA, they still feel that there is something wrong. They know it because they're attached to the spirit that moves through all things, the great force that binds us all together. There is a nervous anticipation people feel, and they don't know where it's coming from. Yet they don't pause long enough to analyze it, to research it, to search their own hearts and their own connections. Preparation is twofold. Learning as much as you can and mastering it. And then keeping the skills alive by teaching someone else. As I say to classes, standard classes, if you leave from here and do nothing with these skills, then grandfather's visions die. And I might add, and his prophecies awaken. But if you leave this class and lead just one person back to the earth, then grandfather's vision, my vision, lives. And you then have become part of the vision. It's only when you lead another back that you become part. What does that mean? Well, that means to me that person that is driven halfway across this country to sit at my school and slice potatoes and make sure the students are fed, who makes my job easier. Those volunteers, those caretakers, those interns who have given up so much of their time and their lives, you people here who have come from miles around. When I walk up in a group of people, you're there with me. Each in your own way, to your own capacity. Thank you. Everything that I went through thus far this morning is a lead-in to the preparation and exodus. It's not only a lead-in, but we started to get into it. We realize that when grandfather sat there for 4 days, I said he said his heart felt heavy as stone, heavy with the burden that he carried. How was he supposed to pass this on? That's what he lamented about. Certainly the elders, the shaman, the spiritual people of a tribe would understand this vision, this prophecy, this warning, these series of warnings. But not everybody else. And certainly, in his mind, not the white man, who was so far removed from the earth that they didn't even know which way the wind was blowing in the morning. How could they understand something this intense that demanded so much awareness, not only on a physical but on a spiritual level? So we come to the threshold of the preparation. Preparation, as I see it, the preparation for the Exodus, takes on a number of different venues. Where I wrote and I lived, that I never succeeded, to pass these prophecies out of my mind and concentrate on learning from grandfather in the wilderness. You know, even after grandfather left and went back to his people and subsequently took his final walk, I virtually wandered for the better part of a decade, still continuing my education. I wanted to practice what grandfather had taught me in every conceivable environment that I could find. I wanted to test my survival skills. I wanted to walk into areas with nothing and from the ground up survive. Pure survival. No tools, no clothing, no conveniences, nothing from the outside world. From the rainforest of the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, to the mesas, to the hottest of deserts, to Death Valley, Grand Canyon, Glacier, Bob Marshall Wilderness Area, the Canadian Rockies, all of it, down through Mexico, grandfather's country, northern Mexico, all the way through Central South America to Argentina, pushing the limits, pushing hard, learning as much as I possibly could. I wanted to test my tracking and counter-tracking in these areas. In other words, go in as a scout, remain invisible as grandfather did when he wandered. Observe, get right up close and personal to the workings of society on the peripheral edge of wilderness as they camped or horseback rode or whatever, and then retire and disappear, evaporate into the landscape like a shadow at dusk. Plus, I wanted to push my awareness, be aware of everything going around me, whether I was in the deepest canyons of Yosemite, or out on the vast plains of Nebraska, or in the deepest jungles of Panama. I wanted to push my awareness. I wanted to know where every insect, every snake, every animal, every human, every threat was located. So for nearly that decade, I kept pushing the edge. I kept learning. And I kept searching. I searched out elders. I tried to find as many elders as I possibly could that could teach me something more than grandfather had. And to tell you the truth, that was the most heart-wrenching, painful search of my life. Because many of the elders that knew anything would preserve one certain skill, and that skill usually had economic values. And that broke my heart, that virtually there was no one left. And I searched long, and I searched hard. I did start to find people as I wandered through Mexico. I found that something changed, some undercurrent, because as I got deeper into Mexico, I found elders that still possessed skill of the ancients. Whether their roots went back to the Aztecs or Mayans or even before that. And the further south I would go, the more elders I would find, the more skills I would integrate into my life. Of all places, the first that I encountered that was anywhere near like grandfather was, in the breadth of knowledge of his people, was in Belize, something I'm seriously entertaining as another tracker excursion. You know, a lot of people say, well, how did you come up with Nicaragua, Costa Rica, certain areas in Brazil, the Guianas, and places like Belize? Well, because I've been there. I lived there. I tested myself there. I suffered there. I died there and was reborn in the soils like grandfather did. But also, it's grandfather. Grandfather was the one who said to me, grandson, the red skies. And he named areas. Oh, not just Central and Upper South America, but up into the Canadian Rockies. All over the place. Safe zones. Places where diseases do not accumulate. That seemed to be the big one. Here's an interesting thing my brother pointed out not a long time ago. I was talking to him about Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Belize, and places like that, and how grandfather really held them in such high regard, where the jungles of Amazonia, oh man, they're deep. They're thick. And I'm thinking, grandfather, yeah, had a lot of respect for him, and they were in his top 10 of where to go. But I figured why they weren't way up there with these other Central American countries was because the biting, gnashing, chewing, scary things that could screw up your life, that are hidden in those jungles. And Jim says, no, I don't think that's the case. He said, what's west of Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama? I said, the Pacific. He said, exactly. Which way does the wind blow? Atlantic one side, Pacific the other. No industry. No people. The winds do not carry disease. Started to make sense. So Belize, I'll remember, is my first encounter with a real elder, a man and an elder woman. I suspect they were living in sin, however. He never referred to her as his wife or she to him as her husband, though they winked at each other a lot. And they were old. They were grandfather-esque in years. And I spent a good month with them. They shunned with a passion everything from civilization. They didn't even own steel. They looked at steel the way you would look at a pile of dog crap or a roadkill. I'm serious. It was with that kind of disgust. And I found that, wow, these folks had unbelievable skill. And the further south that I wandered, I found more people collectively with skills. And by the time you get into the heart of Brazil, you've got lots of people with those skills, lots of elders. Trouble is that the young ones are trying to get away, to escape to the cities and the towns for a better life. But I tried to pass those prophecies out of my mind, certainly. They wouldn't go. They wouldn't budge. They were always there, haunting, nagging. But I look back on that time of wandering in my life, that time of searching, that time of testing. And I realize I was living that prophecy of preparation. And that's part of it. To drive one's self to perfecting the skills, the old ways. You see, and the thing is, it is also driving oneself to preserve the spiritual elements of those skills. Because housed in those spiritual elements of those skills is like the 10 Commandments written in stone by God. They contain within their parameters, whether it be the fire making, the making of bows, the making of baskets or pottery or arrowheads or buckskin. They are a way of life. They are a code of ethics, a discipline that has to be followed if we are to make it as a society, if we are to get back to the earth. The first time a person picks up a piece of firewood and looks at it and realizes it's not just a dead tree. It is the soils of the future. It is not dead. It is living. We're removing it from insects and bacteria and fungi that will break it down, that will add nutrients to the soils of life to come. We have just taken that out of the mix. When we grab that same piece of firewood and realize that in our hands is solid sunshine, air, water, soil, it comes alive because we can place it on the flames of life and bring it back to life. And it can warm us. It can protect us. It can cook our food and purify our water and make our tools. It's a gift. That firewood tells us there is nothing unimportant. That firewood is not just a dead stick laying from the ground. If people would just look at that firewood as they pick it up and realize I'm stealing a handful of soil from my grandchildren, stealing it, then they'd have more reverence for it. Every skill teaches us how to live with the earth and each other. Everything we do. So in this preparation, there is that understanding of these sacred skills on a physical and spiritual level. There is the learning of something to perfection. You know, I say to standard classes, perfect your skills. And I say the Native Americans, primitive people, would make every skill a work of art. You go to a museum, you're left in awe when you see a common bowl or spoon used by native peoples, whether it came from North or South America, whether it came from Africa or Australia. It's a cherished work of art. Why? Is because they appreciated the gift. And they knew that if they did shoddy work, that it would be a reflection on how they felt about that gift. It would be like turning their back on the Creator and creation, spitting in the face of the unseen and eternal. That's why they had to make it perfect. But let's talk about good common sense in a survival situation. If that skill isn't perfect, you're going to take something that works 100% of the time and cut it down to a point where it won't work at all if that workmanship is shoddy enough. Well, you look at that in the making of the skill. Look at yourself as part of that process. You are the maker of that skill. You are the one that appreciates it. And in the making, you must seek mastery, meaning perfection. If you are mediocre at a skill, not only do you not do that skill to perfection, to show your appreciation, but you in turn are imperfect. Because you didn't have the commitment, the drive, the passion, the love of the earth and the Creator to do it the best you can, to be the best you can. So you understand this balance. There's the perfection of the skill and the mastery of self in making that skill. It's a perfect balance and equilibrium. That's why in this preparation, you strive for mastery and beyond. Pushing the limits. Knowing that right now, after 24 hours of hard on and off rain, with a stone, you can go out to that wilderness and cut down the right dead sapling and make yourself a hand drill fire within half an hour. And that comes close to mastery. Every skill must be pushed in this manner. You've got to push yourself in this manner. That's why I would purposely go into a survival situation half-starved, hardly dressed. That's why I would have my mother drop me off miles from home and continually walk back to the Pine Barrens for 25 to 30 hours without stopping, without resting, then go into a survival situation. You push limits. You drive yourself. In all aspects. But those limits in survival come with rules that must be obeyed, or death is the consequence. That's why there's the razor's edge. Society obeys no laws, not the same laws that a survivalist must obey, that the earth must obey. That's why it's so difficult. That's why one day something is right and then the next day something is so wrong. How do you perfect? How do you master living life in a fabricated environment driven by greed and convenience? You don't. Your mind and heart remain in the pure and natural, the ordered. So perfecting those skills on two levels. The product that you make and the ease and dedication and passion which you make it. The mastery of self. Still dealing with the preparation part of this, and what I'm trying to stress here is that, you know, it's one thing on a beautiful, bright, sunny day where you go out and take hours to collect that perfect fireboard or that perfect spindle for a hand drill, find that perfect tinder, and then crank out a hand drill fire. That isn't mastery, not according to grandfather. Mastery is when you're exhausted. It's in the middle of the night. You're in a raging rainstorm. And you have to get that fire cranked out. But the trick is that, yes, there has to be that rush to get it done. But in that translation of the rush, you cannot lose the sacredness or the appreciation. If you can make a hand drill then the circle is completed. I remember once that Rick and I, you never knew when grandfather was going to ask you, do a hand drill, do a bow drill. And that man, we'd be in the middle of trying to get someplace fast, and the weather would be snotty, and bang, he'd ask that. And I remember I was getting fairly good. Now, he wasn't quite pushing the limits of nasty weather, but I remember this one night, he woke me up in the middle of the night, and he said to me, I need a hand drill fire. And I don't know how many hours I tried to get a hand drill fire going, and he wanted it built from scratch. There was no screwing around. I mean, just to find the stones at night by feel was tough enough. And later I found that you can use a number of other things to find the proper stones, or anything else, surrendering, sensing the presence and everything else that we use. But I was still quite young. And I remember it was getting to be dawn, the wind and the rain were dying off. It was on the edge of frozen rain. And grandfather looks at me and he says, grandson, have you mastered the skill? That question tore out my heart like you couldn't believe, because Rick and I, the day before, had been talking about how damn good we were at making hand drill fires, And grandfather looked at me and said, so what have you learned? I said, grandfather, I have not mastered the hand drill. He said, what else, grandson? I said, because I haven't mastered it, I've dishonored the earth and the skill. And he looks at me and says, and I said, and I dishonored my teacher. With that, Rick woke up and started to emerge from his debris hut. The first thing he saw was me, with grandfather standing up and me sitting on the ground, dejected, with a piece of crap hand drill apparatus in my hand, which I instinctively put around the side of me so he couldn't see it. I looked at grandfather's face and I knew exactly what was going to happen. And Rick says, what's going on? I said, you'll probably see tonight. I didn't say another thing about it. But that's what I mean. You don't master a skill until you've mastered yourself. Until that skill has adopted you. That's an important concept. People say, I possess that skill. No, you don't. You must surrender yourself so much to that skill that skill adopts you. It is that skill that decides whether you master it or not. You've got to pass its test. And I know that won't make sense to a lot of people, but we get so arrogant. My skill. No, the skill has adopted me. I got to a point in my life where I thought, mastery. Okay, I understand what mastery is. Then I realized that once you reach that point of mastery, it's like there's layers to it. It's like going all the way through a martial art like karate or judo or jiu-jitsu or ninjutsu or whatever, and getting your black belt and find, man, there's the first dan, second dan, third dan, and so on, black belt, until you become a grandmaster. And what are the grandmasters of the Oriental Defensive Arts doing? They are still practicing, still reaching higher, even though they are considered by all grandmasters. It's a journey that never ends, never comes to a conclusion. So now you know the way that I feel about the term mastery, what it truly means. And now you know what I mean when I say to classes, teach only what you have mastered. Because if you try to teach something you have not mastered, you dishonor the skill and you dishonor the teacher, which is grandfather. That's why I'm such a fanatic in classes that people get it right. Because what they carry with them when they go away from me is my name, my reputation, my school, which is to say, grandfather's school. Now let me say this. Don't let me scare you. Unless you've mastered a skill the proper way according to grandfather, and this is go back to a story with grandfather. My brother was in the Boy Scouts. I had vacated that endeavor a long time ago. I think I lasted 2 weeks. Shortly after a snowstorm, I decided that that was not fun, that was not survival, that was a joke. So I decided to, get out of uniform. My brother stayed with it. He asked me to come in to his Boy Scout patrol, as they called it. There were 6 members in it, and teach the kids, the 3 years younger than me, the bow drill. And Jim kind of knew how to do a bow drill from grandfather, but he wasn't really that good at it. So I said, let me ask grandfather. So I went to grandfather. I said, grandfather, I'm maybe 13 years old, 14 years old. I said, grandfather, I knew what he meant by mastery by this time. I said, I haven't mastered the bow drill, and my brother wants me to teach it. He said, then tell them the truth. Tell them that you have not mastered it yet. That yes, you can get a bow drill going most of the time, in most conditions, but you're still not there. By being honest. And when they see how easily you do it, and yet you still say that you haven't mastered it, it'll give them something to strive for, as you still strive for that mastery, as you still strive to be adopted by the bow drill people. So teach. When you reach that point that you're confident enough that you're going to teach it the right way. But never say you've mastered it until you have. Preparation. That was part of the personal level of preparation. You've heard me say just a few paragraphs ago that when I put myself into survival situations, sometimes I would have my mother drop me off 2 or 3 towns away and take 8, 10, 20, 30 hours to walk into a survival situation under the most brutal conditions I could find. Purposely going without food sometimes for a week before entering a survival situation. Purposely entering a winter survival situation with just a t-shirt on and a pair of shorts, or just a loincloth, and starting from the ground up. In other words, pushing my body hard. Pushing it hard. I say to people even in the standard class, and I wonder how many people really hear it, that with grandfather, I could be assured of 3 lessons a day. They would come without fail. 1 would be a lesson in awareness. Awareness, the doorway to the Spirit. The second would be a lesson in spirit. In other words, a spiritual or philosophical lesson. And the third, without fail, would be a grueling physical workout. Pushing our bodies beyond what we thought were our limits. Yeah, as I say, survival, as it pertains to most of creation, means survival of the fittest. But when it comes to a human animal, fitness is what you know. Fitness is what you know. But if you can back that up with a well-conditioned body, you're that much more efficient and proficient at the skill. So every day was a workout. I remember growing up, I had to do something to help my parents out, so I cut wood. Not with a chainsaw, but with a buck saw, with only one person. And I had to cut, in my early years, a quarter a cord a day and sell it. That's cut, split, stacked, and sold. My dad was kind enough to put it in the back of the laundry truck and deliver it. As I grew older, it grew to be a half a cord, and into 3/4 of a cord, and then a full cord. I don't know if you've done a full cord of wood with a buck saw and a axe, but it gets old. Anyway, and then with grandfather, after that, cutting, going back to the woods, and then doing his workout. And I remember those rare times that I wasn't in camp with grandfather. We had a huge pile of wood out back, and my dad come out and say, "What are you doing?" "I'm moving the wood pile." "Why?" "Ah, Dad, it doesn't look good there. And I got to cut around it." So I'd take and move several cords of wood. Back and forth, back and forth. The harder the conditions, the better. And I'd take a great big old sigh and cut the grass around it. By the end of the day, move it back. I mean, that was my workout. People laugh when they come into the primitive camp and they see, we joke, the Tracker Health Club and Gym. And there's a set of weights out there and all kinds of different exercise and equipment in various degrees of degradation and rust. And they see me and other instructors over there, whether it's the dead of winter or the heat of the summer, pounding out a workout. People ask me, "Why don't you go to the gym and do it?" No. See, in a gym, you're indoors. Controlled heat in the winter, nice and air conditioned in the summer. If you're forced to use those muscles in adverse conditions, they're going to seize up on you. They're going to bind up. I remember my son Paul turned into a big burly football player. And he went to the gym every day, and I remember bringing him into the Pine Barrens with me to help me cut some cedar I needed for a class, and he lasted an hour and a half. It was a cold, bitter, rainy day. His muscles just would not work. Hurt his back, hurt his arms. So part of that discipline of preparation, of mastery of the skill, is pushing your limits. Is mastery of yourself, is getting as strong as you possibly can become to be an efficient tool of the Creator, to become a survival or a tracking or awareness machine. And, in the final analysis, It's strange what that kind of self-discipline will achieve. How many of you see me, even in the coldest winter days, wear much more than this that I have here? And you've been to classes where there's snow on the ground and everything else. When have you seen me in a very, very heavy pair of boots? It's usually boat moccasins, even in a foot of snow. That's just from years of training. Being able to turn up and down my internal thermostat. That's part of the preparation. But all of that self-preparation, all of that discipline, all of that self-sacrifice to reach this sense of mastery is not so much for you. It is for those that you will lead back to the earth. You have got to, in other words, prepare others for the Exodus. You know, a lot of people, when they think about that, what am I going to do? Go out in the street and, tell people, hey, the skies are going to turn red, in a couple of weeks. Want to learn some skills so you can stay alive a day or two longer? How many people are going to buy into that? You'd be better off in New York carrying a sign, But if there's a local Boy Scout group, and those boys or Girl Scouts would love to learn or see a bow drill or a hand drill or an arrowhead being made, and you could teach them, that is your inroad. That is your inroad. It is from there. If you have 10 kids and it peaks and they all are, whoa, that's cool. But there's one or two that are just hooked. They're amazed. Or adults. Doesn't make a difference. Certain skills fascinate adults. I mean, real skills. Anyway. That to me is when the vision comes alive. And people say, oh, what can I do? And I say to people, look, you're out in the middle of the woods and there's a piece of paper and there ain't no one around to see you pick it up. And you pick it up, you affect the spirit that moves through all things in a very positive way. You send out a concentric ring across the entire earth. Sound inconceivable? It's just like they proved through quantum mechanics or whatever the highfalutin terms is, that a flap of a butterfly's wing in the Canary Islands can affect a hurricane bearing down on Cancun. That's a flap of a butterfly wing, picking up a piece of paper, tapping into that consciousness. Mama, I'm your child. Heal me. And you say to yourself, well, okay, am I really doing anything? You know what you're really asking? I don't see the end results. I don't get the praise from that, which I crave. My staff goes to me, hey, Tom, I got a great letter in. I don't want to see it. Tom, I got this nasty-ass letter in. Let me have it. I want the negative. I want to know where I failed. You want to talk about a mess of hardened people? I had to live on a movie set. Talk about a fabricated environment. Talk about dog eat dog, shark eat shark, fabricated environment. You should see that set come back to life. I could be standing there with a group of people from every department, from makeup to wardrobe to props, and say, whoa, mountain lion trek. And they're all like, really? Yeah, look. Put your fingers in it, you can feel the toes. Isn't that cool? See if you can find the other right up there, that den. Wow, hey, you mean there's mountain lions around here? Yeah. And then I just walk away. That's like, you pull the pin, you throw the grenade, and you just walk. And it's like they're so interested in tracks, you disappear. And it's like you can hear them, the excitement. They turn into little children again. These hardened dolly grips, the big burly dudes who've seen it all under, the whip of a director. Put that dolly here and do that with it, kind of a thing. And they're like, woo. Pop an arrowhead out of a beer bottle bottom. Here, Sid, give me that beer bottle. Here. Could you teach me to do that? Yes, Sid. Amazing. You just have to be a coyote like grandfather. You have to pique someone's attention. You have to somehow find a place to inspire them, to spark an interest. See, there's something sexy, something alluring about the ancient and eternal. Look at the shows on television. Survivor, the game show. The Survivor Man. All of that. People look at that and, whoa. That's neat. I love it. But that's part of our preparation, is the preparation of others, not just the self. You see where it's now gone from self? It takes effort to reach someone. You've got to stop what you're doing. You've got to plan something. Or you got to spontaneously teach when the opportunity arises. To say that key word or do that key action that will grab someone's attention. Then you can see the concentric ring go off. No, you can't go up to them and say the skies are turning red. But every little thing we do is so damn important. Like I said, and I don't know if I used this before, one of my favorite illustrations was during the Pinelands Jamboree, when all the pineys, were putting on stands and livestock, and it was a blustery day. Hot dog wrappers were blowing all over the place, and I had just got done giving a lecture. And I remember I was holding Cody, and I was in the middle of this field. There was a lot of picnic tables around, and this older fella I was talking to lost this hot dog wrapper, and Cody let out this unbelievable scream. And everybody looked over toward Cody, and he kicked to get down and ran after that paper and picked it up. Everybody's watching him. And he's heading toward the garbage can. He's picking up another and another and another and another until he had so much paper his little hands couldn't carry anymore. And for a 3-4-year-old or whatever, to try to get that into one of those garbage cans, that was tough, and everybody was watching him. And then I watched it happen like a ripple. No, this was like an atomic blast. Everybody began to pick up paper. I remember a guy in a wheelchair with a cane he was holding, trying to stab a piece of it. Little kids running around picking it up, parents picking it up. In 2 minutes, the entire field and picnic area was clean of every piece of paper. See, there you see the results. Where you don't see it is if you're in the middle of the woods and you see that piece of paper or garbage and pick it up. Oh, ye of little faith. You don't realize that action, that thought, that love, that dedication, your commitment to the earth explodes out and touches people, and they don't even realize it. 2 miles away, it may touch someone else that suddenly sees a piece of paper and doesn't know why, but is compelled to pick it up. Yeah, we all love that instant gratification of watching what happened when that little 3-4-year-old Cody picked up that paper and see that concentric rings go out and people moved and touched. We have to have that same faith that the same thing happens when we pick up that piece of paper in the woods. So, the preparation is mastery. Learning as much as you can, carrying that heaviness in your heart of those prophecies, knowing damn full well that they're going to happen. It's in every paper every day. It's in the skies at night and at the skies at dawn. The colors they change as the sun filters through the damn pollution. The warning signs are all around, the diseases that are coming worldwide. Our personal discipline and preparation, our journey to mastery, and along the way, teaching others to whatever capacity we can, whatever our vision dictates. As I say, geez, just reach one person. It's like a flock of sandpipers that suddenly change direction. I suspect, as grandfather suspected, it just takes one bird, one thought, to initiate that thought that ripples through that flock and turns the flock. That's all it takes. That's why I look at society as that flock of sandpipers. You look at things the way I look at it. Don't look at it, man, we need half the people on earth to love and cherish this earth like we do in order to turn the flock. Look at it my way. All you need is one more person. But who is that person going to be? Is it going to be someone I reach? I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm protected. I'm an island. I don't have to really deal with society. My whole world, everybody that surrounds me, speaks my language, understands my heart, is a fellow walker of this vision. But could it be someone that you reach? Yes, because you're the warriors. You, on a day-to-day basis, are on the front lines facing people who don't understand our language, who do not hear the drummer we hear, do not dream the dreams and live the visions that we live. And it's those people. All you got to do is find the right one and touch them, lead them back, and the flock may turn. You know, people say to me, geez, Tom, I'd love to do what you're doing. Yeah. There's not a person in this room with enough time. You put all the classes you've ever had from me together. You know, I just turned 58. I met grandfather when I was 7. You know what that tells you? Come April of this year, I will have been learning from grandfather for 51 years. 51 years obsessed with these skills. The first nearly 11 years with grandfather, pushing the limits. Nearly the better part of a decade pushing myself throughout North and South America, tracking for the government in foreign countries across both ponds, in every conceivable environment, and in 30 years of teaching at the tracker school. Do you have enough time left to get to that level? Reach one person. Do what Rick does and reach a bunch of kids. Our future. Start a group. Do do whatever it takes. You begin to really live this vision the day that you decide, I'm going to master this. I love this so much. I got so much passion for this. I'm going to master it. And it really takes off when you start to lead people back. That is the preparation. Because once you begin to lead even one person back, you then begin to awaken them to what is going on, the warning. That is so evident all around us, with every sunrise and sunset, with every sub-headline in every paper of new diseases and people dying of this and that and the other thing. The chaos, the out-of-control nature of society, of gunmen walking through schools and killing people, walking into convenience stores and killing people. A society virtually out of control. We're in the threshold, the age of the preparation. And we're nearing the end. Now, this sixth prophecy, and as we're calling it for these recordings, and earlier on I tried to explain the real placement of these, but I also explained that Grandfather held these three supporting prophecies off until a much later date. He wanted to make sure I assimilated these other four foundational prophecies, warnings. They're not just prophecies, they're warnings. At once these warnings take place, once they're done, we're into that prophecy. So the second part of that sixth prophecy is the Exodus. It bears the question, when do you start the Exodus? Do you wait for the red skies as Grandfather predicted, as he prophesied, when that warning comes? And my answer is no. The preparation for the Exodus should be taking place during the preparation years, when you are pushing your skills, when you are seeking to master both self and skill and leading others, teaching others. The preparation for that Exodus must be also taking place. It is the hidden reason that I wandered so extensively after Grandfather. If I just said to you that I wandered to test my skills of survival, tracking, and awareness, and the philosophy of living with the earth in every conceivable environment of North and South America, and to seek out elders to teach me, that would only be half the story. The other half is the reason I was doing that was to establish escape routes, safe havens, take a long, cold, hard, almost analytical look at a landscape and say, how safe will this be when those skies turn red? Can a person survive here? Will the masses stay away from the area? Can diseases infiltrate? You know, when Grandfather said that the Spirit told him that the children of the earth must flee to the wild places, That is the Exodus. But you need a wild place that scares the hell out of anyone that is not a child of the earth. And grandfather, to me, spelled a lot of these areas out. Canadian Rockies, beautiful during their short spring, summers, and falls. They can be brutal in the winter. You best have your abilities all together up there, because those Rockies are unforgiving. That's why I spent so much time in the winter in Montana. That's why the expert course is held in Montana in the winter. It presses one's limits to the extreme in survival. And for the early years, I used to gravitate to that scenario, but I watched the development of clothing and footwear and rations and stuff like that, and I'm realizing that as people are buying into these Darth Vader type of suits and stuff, that they can get into the Rockies, the northern, cold, thankless, deadly Rockies in the winter, without any problem. Not certainly for an extended stay. But like grandfather said, they were given a choice a long time ago, and the wilderness will kill them, will destroy them, will not let them in. I hear people say, oh, and I know this is a side note from all of this. People say, oh, I'm a hunter. If the crap hits the fan, I'm just hunting for my food. Yeah. Hunting season every year, people say that. But 1% of the hunters come back with 90% of the game. Or I think it's 2% of the hunters come back with 90% of the game. The rest are left starving if this was truly a survival situation. Their numbers would certainly be culled. And those hunters that do get the game, especially around populated areas like this, they're baiting. They are scouting throughout the year. They know the movement of deer herds. All they have to do is wait for the deer to come to them. It's rare that a hunter today that will be able to track, stalk, and kill a deer. So that's why I tended to lean toward areas like Central America and South America. Certainly they do not have to deal with cold, but they have to deal with the unknown. Plants that will kill you. Insects that will screw up your life. Snakes that'll kill you. Those areas are lethal. And if you don't know these areas, if you don't know the little idiosyncrasies of survival there, they will chew you up and spit you out dead. But Tom, I can't afford to go with you down to these places to learn this stuff. I've taught you. As soon as I taught you inner vision, I taught you. As soon as I taught you to sense presence, I taught you. If you listen to those jungles, those rainforests, they will speak to you because you are one of their children. They will guide you. You will reach deep into the bowels of your instinct and your inner vision and know not to put a shelter straight on the ground. So part of the preparation is the preparation of the Exodus. It does not begin the day you leave. Like I made a statement a few weeks ago. People look at that godforsaken Hummer of mine. Why the hell did you get that? And I coyly say, well, because we use it for search and rescue and getting people out of the woods. And that's a mess of bullshit. I'll carry somebody out of the woods. You know, granted, one of my old ones yanked a tiger out of the woods that the police shot, you know, that I had to track because they couldn't get the vehicles that they had into it. No, the reason I began to get those vehicles is I started to look, and that's during the time, and I can't, unless I had my journals, I can't get to every idiosyncrasy, but the first one I purchased, we were looking at 2011 as the red skies. Remember, I said that date moves up and back. Remember, some of you that go back a long way, I used to have this big old box in the back of my car. And eventually that disappeared. Well, that box is buried over in the Pine Barrens. I wanted to know if I had to get in my vehicle in a moment's notice, locked in the back of that car, is everything I needed to get to where I was going. And then I just abandoned the thing. It had food for enough days. It had cordage. It had this. It had that. It had every imaginable thing locked in there. And as that date slowly began to get back to 2032, the box disappeared. I buried it in the Pine Barrens. That's why this thing's eventually going to disappear. I don't need it. I ain't going any place in 2032. Wipe the tapioca pudding off my face while I lecture to the last few remaining people who haven't succumbed to the disease. I would love to see the promised land, but grandfather said I won't. And I'll listen to grandfather. Never been wrong. But I've got routes planned. I've got routes planned up into the Canadian Rockies, down to Central and South America, down to Argentina. In various locations, I have stuff buried on friends' property. Tommy's got the code of where it is. Tommy knows where I'm going. So does Frank Sherwood. So does Malcolm. Carl doesn't. I had to put that in. I got to bring you with me. You got the greatest laugh in the world. I remember from your first standard class, I could pick your laugh out of 1,000. Anyway, I got the routes planned. I have stuff buried. Will I ever use them? Who knows? Err on the side of caution. What do I got buried? Holy crap, I'm doing a whole intensive class on the Exodus. The idiosyncrasies, the nuts and bolts, the mechanics, how one has to travel and all of that. I know exactly how much time on foot it takes me to go from New Jersey, from grandfather's camp, following the prescribed rule of traveling survival, where you travel 3 days, put up a survival camp for 2, replenish your supplies, and hit the road again. I know exactly how long it takes to get me to the center of Mexico or the center of the Canadian Rockies. How much longer it takes to get down to Belize, how much longer it takes to get to Guatemala, Brazil, and so on. I know what routes I can travel. I want to do what John Muir did. I want to travel the wildest, leafiest tracks I can find, because I don't want to get anywhere near the roads of man. Do you think it was by accident the grandfather would not allow us to use a human trail or roadway? It was taboo. If he saw me walking on a trail of a human, he wouldn't talk to me for a day or a week sometimes. Called me lazy, took the easy way out, called me a person who could never become a scout, because when I felt no one was looking, I could disobey the rules of the scout, to never take the same route twice. Lazy, because it's harder to push the brush. It's harder to move along the raccoon runs and trails and small deer trails rather than to take the easy, wide open routes of man. But those easy, wide open routes of man will come an easy death. Remember, when the whole domino effect takes place, when diseases starts wiping out so many of our population, you know, the fun ones like Ebola and AIDS that has gone airborne and starts killing people within months, SARS and all kinds of other stuff start taking over, we're going to be left with about 10% of the population, as grandfather's guesstimate, and my guesstimate, and not just in the United States, but worldwide. Thanks to modern air travel, they're not even going to be called ponds anymore. Like the old expression, London's just on the other side of the pond. It's starting to be called jump the puddle. It's that close. The world is imploding. Diseases can travel in a heartbeat now. And the diseases are not just going to be confined to humans. They're going to get into our livestock, get into our grain crops, our apples, oranges, pears, you name it. Food, as we know it as a human species, modern human species, is going to disappear. So what then will the remaining people who remain virtually almost disease-free, other than being pathetic, malnourished carriers, feed upon? First, the remains of the dead. We've seen it happen how many times in histories, and Andean plane crashes and Donner's Pass in California and God knows what else. And then eventually they're going to start hunting other people. That's why that you must live like a scout. You have to travel like a scout, like a shadow, invisibly, because you will be hunted. That's why your awareness must be like that of a scout. Your tracking and counter-tracking must be like that of a scout, and your survival must be high speed and invisible. Because you'll be hunted by two demons, hungry humans and diseases waiting to infect. So you have to stay hidden. You have to stay healthy. And it is out of that new order, that exodus, that a new order will be born. A new order that is an old order. An order of family, of clans, of tribes, of democracy at its finest, like the 7 nations. Where people live in balance and harmony with the earth and with each other. Where every community is a sense of kinship and love and compassion. That all must take place during the Exodus. And it's troublesome, grandfather said, and I will stress this, that you must live for that decade as the Apache Scouts. Small bands, highly mobile, highly invisible, never settling down in one place for very long and erasing every trace of yourself. So, in fact, you could only be found and tracked by another scout. And if you can be tracked and found by another scout, he or she is not your enemy. He or she is your kin, part of your tribe, your clan, the new order. So the Exodus, for me, began in 1968 when I left New Jersey and began to wander. You know, the year you were born? Anyway. It's funny that Celeste accuses me, and rightly so, of brooding. I brood often. I'm all about brooding. You look up brooding in the dictionary and they have my picture. But what do I brood about? Oh, what I'm going to teach. I brood, I worry about what's happening to the earth. The children, the grandchildren of the earth. I've got running scenarios in my mind as I watch what is unfolding in the world. How is the route changed? What do I tell Tommy to do if the red skies happen tonight? What route do I gauge him, put him on? And so on and so forth. It's a constant chess game that never ends. You can't go home and close the door. You're like the last of the sentinels, watching the skies, waiting, feeling it. Like something stalking you from behind, so close, waiting to pounce. You know it is going to happen. The question is, when? With only a small if involved. If, in this preparation, as we stand here at the threshold of total annihilation, we make the right decision as a society.